Speaking of Tim Couch, speaking of Carson Wentz, and who was kind enough, which franchise was kind enough to give the Eagles the opportunity to draft the future and the boy who would be king, those Cleveland Browns. It's Rick Morris from the FDH Lounge in Cleveland. What's up, Rick? Appreciate you joining the show, pal. How you been?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. We always talk about the links between our cities and our teams, and it just seems like they go stronger all the time.
Right? I mean, Cleveland fascinates me, to be honest with you. The Browns fascinate me because with all the turnover they've had and with all the different hirings from the GMs right on down to the head coaches since Romeo Cornell, I think they're on their sixth coach since 2008. They've had 15 different starting quarterbacks since 2008. They sat at number 2. They bring in Hugh Jackson, a guy I would have appreciated if my team went out and interviewed this guy, maybe even shot him a text, maybe a phone call, kicked the tires on him because I really liked him in terms of the candidate. He goes to Cleveland. He acquires RG3 with number 2. Then they move back with the Eagles. They were instrumental in obviously acquiring the picks the Eagles gave to them in order to give the Eagles the number 2 pick, Carson Wentz. And then the Browns went out and did some interesting things in the draft. I mean, they got Corey Coleman with their first pick at 15, and they did some things that were criticized, but some things you can see, all right, that makes sense. Why, let me ask you this, in terms of what you know about Hugh Jackson and the way he goes about things and running the organization, why give up Carson Wentz if apparently he's that good and they've had problems at quarterback and do the things that Cleveland has done?
Well, in the course of our last discussion, I think we talked about this, that they were really leaning strongly of the 2 quarterbacks if they had their pick towards Jared Goff, which was who I also wanted them to take if he was available. And unfortunately, the Rams and Titans got together and screwed our franchise and made sure that wasn't going to happen. So Carson Wentz was just not as high in their regard for whatever reason. And there were just some various things that you hear here and there. Certainly he was going to take a little bit more work, and I was a little bit concerned. I guess it was a successful smokescreen that was out there that they really wanted Carson Wentz because it had been sort of propagated in the media that he was their guy. And I'm looking at it going, Hugh Jackson is a guy where there's been, at various points in his career, especially towards the end in Oakland, a fine line between confidence and overweening ego. And I was worried that he looked at Carson Wentz and had the ego to say, I can make that kid a Pro Bowler immediately, whereas we all know it's going to take a lot of work. And I've been listening to what you've been saying about him tonight, and I somewhat agree with you, but there's not a lot of precedent for a kid coming into the league this highly drafted as a small school quarterback. And I think there's some concern that he's going to need to get up to quote-unquote NFL speed in a way that he wouldn't have to, say, had he come out of the SEC.
So, Rick, are you saying or implying that he needs time to sit and marinate, or start him right away, or it's just going to take, in the big picture, just time for him to acclimate himself to the National Football League?
I'm sympathetic to the notion of sitting him for a while. I mean, if he comes in and has a blow-away training camp, I think you got to kind of go with it because he is your future, and I do agree with your point tonight about where you're at in the growth curve and are you setting things back. I certainly am familiar with looking at this things through this prism as a Clevelander and setting things back. And we ourselves have set things back another year in this city, unless you believe RG3 is the answer, which it's kind of hard to when you look at the course of his career. He's never had success outside of that 1 year in a gimmick offense that was unsustainable. So I'm familiar with the thought process here, and I'm sympathetic to it in terms of not wanting to set things back. More than anything else, I'm just amused by the whole thing with Sam Bradford. For a guy who got, a fat 2-year contract.
Yes.
What did he think the message was? He didn't get a 5 or 6 year deal. The message was, you're our bridge to whatever. He doesn't like being the bridge. This probably doesn't change matters for him, which is, I know why you're so agitated, because it does look like Bradford's going to be the guy at least this year. So I don't know why he's so upset.
You make a good point. I think, again, I don't know this for sure, I think that he feels that the Eagles duped him. And I wasn't in the meeting, I wasn't in the room when he walked out and stormed out and asked for a trade and whatever. It seems a little odd. I do grant you that. My thing is, I know why they wouldn't tell him of their plans, even though maybe the writing was on the wall, because you had to get Bradford first. You didn't know if you were going to be able to go up to get the number 2 at Cleveland, or maybe it wasn't on your chart or your idea or your thought process at the time. But here it is. He's back. They're going to meet on Monday, I guess, and we'll see what happens going forward. My thing was, if you could get something for him at the draft, get something for him and and start the process now. Now, your team has had problems with quarterbacks, especially first-round picks. Since Tim Couch, you've drafted 4 quarterbacks in the first round and haven't had that success. So tell me what the thought process is with RG3 going forward. And you had a ton of picks in the draft that just took place. And where do you think that Hugh Jackson was on the money?
Well, I think that he was on the money as far as filling holes. This team was very good, at the very least, at attempting to fill holes. A gaping chasm at wide receiver that they certainly threw enough bodies at anyway. So Charles Higgins, that seems to be the one that a lot of people are liking based on his college production. He's a pro-ready guy, albeit from the 5th round, but he looks like he's going to step in right away. Ricardo Lewis, a little bit more of a project, albeit he went around higher, I guess, based on upside. Couple other bodies there. Of course, the first-round pick, Corey Coleman, over Laquan
I was
Treadwell.
just going to ask you that. What were your thoughts on that? Treadwell fell, and he was sitting there, and Corey Coleman was the guy that Hugh Jackson plucked.
I like Treadwell, to be honest with you. I would have made that pick, and there's just a lot. It just irritates me this time of year, a lot of the smart mark commentary you get out there from a lot of the proletariat, Oh, he's a slow guy. He's had leg issues. Megatron... How many races did Megatron win? I mean, he wasn't slow, but he wasn't the biggest burner in the league either. But
neither was Jerry Rice.
Yeah, Jerry Rice. I mean, that kind of stuff just irritates me. Coleman might be the best physical specimen, but again, you talk about taking chances. This is a thing where, again, you're getting bigger cornerbacks in the league for one thing. So a guy who's 5'10" is going to have guys towering over him. So much for the over-the-shoulder pass, even if we can find a guy that can throw one. And then again, how is he going to hold up physically? I didn't necessarily like that pick. I would have rather had Treadwell, but at least they filled the hole there. They tried to fill the hole at outside linebacker with a couple of guys. They did a good job there. As far as it goes with RG3, dating back to that part of your question, I would say, again, he has every opportunity this fall to seize the reins. Again, still doesn't have a whole lot of weapons to work with there, especially after letting Travis Benjamin walk away for nothing. But he's going to have an opportunity. And I don't know if there's a lot of hope in this town for that outside of the general thing of, Hugh Jackson really sort of is the quarterback whisperer. Maybe he can get something out of him. To be honest with you, there's already a lot of debate in this town about next year's draft. This is the odds-on favorite to have the number 1 pick again next year. Are you looking at Watson at quarterback, Kelly, presumably the first pick overall?
Yep.
And again, this is a team that's not going to be favored on paper to win a single game this year. Although, in talking to some of my show contributors, we all kind of figure 2 wins, which means they're going to steal 2 games because they're not better than any of the teams on the schedule. The funny thing is, we were kind of laughing about this internally a little bit. What are the winnable games potentially? Well, at Philly week 1, Baltimore home opener week 2, 2-0 start, 2-14 finish would be so Cleveland of us, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Brings me back to the days of Rich Kotite now that you mentioned it. But let me ask you, speaking with Rick Morris from the FDHLounge.com in Cleveland, he's on the Comcast Business Hotline. When the trade happened, Rick, because there, I know the pulse of this fan base here and what they thought of the trade, and it was split a little bit because they did give up a lot and they have holes to fill. What was the pulse of the fan base in Cleveland when Hugh Jackson decided to pass on the number 2 pick, which could have been a quarterback even if it wasn't Goff, and play for down the road and acquire picks from the Eagles, have a first round pick from them, and a couple other a 2 and a 3, and they flip flop 4s and 5s. What was the thoughts of the fan base, I guess, as a whole?
Because it was a pretty nice haul, I would say more favorable than not, because there certainly wasn't a pro-Wentz consensus in this town.
Gotcha.
You had fans that were kind of looking in a couple different directions, and even a somewhat small plurality, but a group of fans anyways, who have some hope for RG3. So I think the thought was moving back, accrue the picks, kind of go with that plan. On balance, probably more popular than not. I will say also, too, if you believe in the old conspiracy theory here, one of the things that certainly helped this team in the haul of picks, as you bemoaned a little bit earlier on, former Browns coach Pat Shurmur making that haul a little bit fatter by winning in Week 17 with the Eagles last year.
Yes.
So, thank you, Pat. You did more for us in Philadelphia than you ever did in Cleveland.
Right? See, that never ceases to amaze me. Winning that illustrious last meaningless game, which kills you in the draft. It does nothing for you down the road and in the future. And then you're sitting there in April going, I wish we were a couple slots higher. Yeah, that win really did a lot for the team. And then back-to-back years as well. Chip Kelly the year before, when they're trying to go get Marcus Mariota, he wins a meaningless game against the Giants at MetLife Stadium. But let me ask you something, Rick. So your team said, I think you had 14 picks in this draft. Cody Kessler you took, I believe, in the third round. Was that a flyer? Or could he be the kid from USC, as the next quarterback there? And I'm looking at some depth charts. It looks like Josh McCown is the starting quarterback for you guys right now. I know it's only May, but who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Browns this year?
The thought is that it's going to be RG3 by the time training camp is done, because he is not a developmental guy. I mean, he's going to need to run in an actual pro offense for once in his life, but that's not the same as Josh McCown mentoring a guy coming out of college. RG3 is pro ready to whatever degree. He should be the guy in there. Cody Kessler, everybody's scratching their head on that one. And again, in talking to some of our show contributors here at the FDH Lounge, there's a decent amount of, because again, so many of them, like myself, are Cleveland-based. There's a certain amount of giving the benefit of the doubt to Hugh Jackson in terms of this is a guy he wants, but what's the best case scenario for the kid, really, as I look at it? The best case scenario, it seems like, is you have your Don Strock, you have your guy to hold the clipboard for 15 years and come in and maybe give you a little bit of magic off the bench. And look, if you can solidify the backup spot, I don't want to demean that notion completely. It's worth something. I don't think it's worth a third-round pick. And by the way, circling back to what you said about meaningless wins at the end of the season screwing up the draft for you, people tend to forget about this, but that almost happened in this town in another sport. The last game of the 2002-2003 season, the Cleveland Cavaliers went out there and won that game that night, thus putting the Cavs in a tie with Denver for the most ping-pong balls as opposed to having the most outright. That's a game that could have cost the franchise LeBron James, as I was screaming that night listening to the game on the radio. So these things, it didn't have the consequence there. It had consequence for your Eagles when Pat Shurmur screwed up by winning. But again, for as much as fans talk about, and you get a lot of them, you know the type. You never want your own team to lose. That's ridiculous. Sometimes you do. Sometimes they need to.
Yeah, just look at the Sixers. They made an art form out of it. Let me ask you something, Rick. You mentioned LeBron. We can't let you go without talking about LeBron James. And, you guys had a plethora of first-round picks and top picks, too, and you hit on LeBron, obviously, and Kyrie and whatnot. Now you have Kevin Love in the mix, and those two guys were not in the mix in the finals last year against the Warriors. Team's healthy. They're 8-0. LeBron seems to have a little chip on his shoulder, as it has appeared from time to time over the last couple of years now that Steph Curry appears to be the face of the NBA. A two-part question. One, they seem very focused, the Cavs do, and where are they in terms of that? Where do you think they can get to this year, even if they face the Warriors or Oak City? And what do you make of LeBron? He mentioned he was asked about Steph Curry and the MVP, and he gave him his props and then said, yeah, we kind of have to define what MVP means, or maybe it should be most outstanding player. And he almost hedged a little bit. He seemed a little uncomfortable. He certainly didn't want to hear about, what's his name? The kid from San Antonio was number 2 in the voting. He just seems like he's uncomfortable with these individual awards and him not getting 100% of the spotlight. Is that an accurate assessment?
I think so, and I think it's part of the life cycle of megastars in this league. If you go back maybe about a decade or so, Kobe was really kind of bristling whenever he would get questions about, hey, isn't LeBron the greatest thing since sliced bread? So, that's the way it works with the egos of these megastar players. And now LeBron is the slightly older guy who is bristling, having to hear about how somebody else reinvented the game of basketball. So, we've kind of seen the thing come full circle in LeBron's career, as he is now 31 years old, but looking very, very strong at this point. Coach Ty Lue has pointed out that his usage rate in the playoffs this year has been way down from last year, and that's what happens when you have the shared burden across a much wider berth of guys here. And I have to tell you, it's a huge head-scratcher to me, the way that the national media has looked at this coming into the playoffs and all this gaga about, some of these teams in the East have narrowed the gap with the Cavs this year. Really, the Cavs weren't even the number one seed in the East last year, thanks to Atlanta going on that flukishly hot streak, which we saw meant nothing in the end. The Cavs were the number one seed this year. They added Channing Frye at the trade deadline. They added Richard Jefferson before the season. We have seen a better and more consistent J.R. Smith this year. Much better ball movement since Ty Lue took over as coach. Kind of a controversial move making the switch, but the players are more responsive to him. He's certainly getting more out of Kevin Love than Coach Blatt did. So it was unfair that Blatt got whacked, but sometimes life isn't fair. But you look at it now, and just everything is just ticking. I mean, Miami or Toronto, quite frankly, is going to be the next sacrificial lamb. It's the Cavs may not lose a game until the finals. It may be faux at this rate, seeing them go through, because when your three-point percentage is 50.7%, when you have Tristan Thompson in there pulling down 6 offensive rebounds a game as he was against Atlanta, that brought me back many, many years ago watching the Cavs against the Bulls in the 92 East Finals. And while everybody was talking about Jordan and Pippen, the guy that I thought really ripped our heart out was Horace Grant. He had like 5.5 offensive boards a game. Chicago didn't miss on offense very often. You kind of want to get the ball back when they do, and Horace Grant was denying the Cavs that. That's the same thing Tristan Thompson did. He must be public enemy number one in Atlanta, but he's a guy that doesn't even get talked about relative to the big three. So it shows you the depth that's there. Golden State, it would be a heck of a matchup. I personally am not convinced that Steph Curry is back all the way. And I'll tell you right now, I would sign a petition to get the Houston Rockets floor mopper a championship ring if the Cavs win it this year, because I don't think he's going to be 100%. You start compensating for your leg. That's what Kyrie Irving did last year when he got hurt. It was one thing after another with him. I don't think Curry is done being banged up. Oklahoma City, I have to eat my words because I didn't think they'd get past San Antonio. I don't think they would give the Cavs a whole lot of trouble, to be honest with you. I think the Cavs could live with 40 and 40 from the big two and, another 15 from the rest of the team combined, quite frankly. Golden State, obviously, would be a lot of trouble, and I think would be and should be the favorites, but the Cavs right now are shooting better at the three-point line than Golden State is.
Yeah, so, those 25 threes against Atlanta, unbelievable, and I thought Atlanta didn't do themselves well. It was a bad look complaining about it. Rick, I got about 20 seconds to go. If they do face Steph Curry, and I'd love to see LeBron and Steph go at it again, any I guess, saltiness from that 34-point loss when Steph said going into Cleveland in January, hey, maybe we can still smell the champagne, and they got whacked then to Cleveland at home? Or is that just something in the past, or is there some bad blood that still exists?
Memories are long. The crowd will be louder and more hostile than it was last year. And you heard it here first. The pressure will be off the Cavs. The 52-year championship drought ends tonight. Stipe Miocic, UFC 198 in Brazil, will bring the UFC World Heavyweight Championship to Cleveland.
And it ends tonight. 52 years, my man. I love it. Yep. I love it, Rick. All right, we appreciate it, pal. Appreciate the time. Good luck. We'll check in with you as the playoffs continue, and when new developments with the Browns and Eagles continue, we'll check back with you, Rick. We appreciate it, pal.
Thank you as always, Joe. You're the best.
All right, Rick. Take care. You too, pal. Rick Morris from the FDHLounge.com in Cleveland, giving us that perspective.